الله وبركاته. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمد عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي فقعوا له ساجدين. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. My dear respected listeners, it is only by the permission and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are allowed to enter a house of worship dedicated to the submission and to chant the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it were not for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a special permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would not have been allowed to enter. Kings only allow in their courts those people that they accept and that they like. So the enemies of the king are not allowed even near the court. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to enter His house of worship, this entry alone deserves that we give limitless thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Ya Allah, even with our negligence, even with our days of ignorance, even with from the morning to this time, the things that we did, and from previous last Jumu'ah to this Jumu'ah, the things that we did, Ya Allah, there's things that we cannot mention in public, but You knew all along, and still You allowed us another entry into Your house, even with the impurities that we have. So therefore we should give immense thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the past few weeks we've been talking about the purpose of the sending of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. And we talked about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done a unimaginable bounty and favor to humanity by giving us the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and making him a human being. And we talked about how he connects us with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He recites and teaches us to recite the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have come from the person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that every speech has a indestructible connection with the speaker. Speech is a property of the speaker, and the words have the energy of the speaker. That is the reason why we are very particular that what kind of books should we read. It's a book, I can read it. Do you know the author? Do you know the energy that the author is going to transfer into your kids or into you through the words? The book of Allah is such that it contains the energy directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a big blessing that he took it on his heart, as has been mentioned in the Quran, that Jibreel alayhi salam, فَإِنَّهُ نَزَّلَهُ عَلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ, he brings it to your heart. The Quran, the words of Allah that contain direct energy from Allah. That Quran which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself said that if we had sent down upon mountains, you would have seen those mountains being crushed under the weight of the Quran. That Quran, the chest of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received, the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received, and transmitted it to humanity. Such a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we talked about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam purifying people and teaching them purity. And last week we talked about the importance of physical purity, which is that if you do not have that proper purity, there is no way that you are even allowed to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If somebody stands before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in salah knowingly without wuzu, they are committing one of the greatest acts of sin. Standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowingly without wuzu. May Allah protect us. This is such a serious thing. So physical purity is very important, purity of the body. But today what we want to talk about, inshallah, and the discussion that we want to start is that a human being is not only all that you see and only that you see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayah that I recited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned something called ruh. Then the other ayah that I just recited about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned something called qalb. And then in several other ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned these things and also mentioned nafs. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. So these things we constantly see in the Quran itself, and of course in the beautiful words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ayah that I recited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the angels, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ, when I have built its physical structure and straightened it, given it proper shape, appropriate shape, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and then when I have blown into it ruh, specially coming from me, a ruh that comes from me, it has a special connection from me. It is not Allah himself, na'udhu billah. The aqidah of hulul, the aqidah of na'udhu billah, us having a physical connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is totally inappropriate. But ruh, Allah is mentioning, is something that is especially from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ, they ask you about ruh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي, just tell them it is from the command of my Lord. That is it. You cannot understand beyond that. But it is from a special direct command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. So فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ, when I have made the body and made it proper, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and I have blown into it ruh, especially from me, فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ, then right away all of you fall in sajda before him. So from this we understand that the real deal of a human being, the very more important, the most important and valuable part of a human being is not the body. It is that ruh which Allah has blown into this body. And it is a very simple thing to understand. As long as a person is living, we call them what? A human being. But when the ruh escapes the body, which is the definition of death, we call it a dead body. We call it a dead body. So therefore, this human being is a combination of that which we see, which is the body, and that which we cannot see, which is the ruh. And ruh is the more valuable part, and it is something that has a special connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That ruh, because of its connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the reason why human being, or Sayyidina Adam ala nabiyina salatu wassalam, was made the masjood of malaika, the one that the malaika, the angels, did sajda to out of reverence and respect. It was not a sajda of ibadah. The sajda of ibadah has never been allowed. The sajda of reverence and respect was allowed in all shara'i', all shari'ats before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the deen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most perfect one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped that sajda of respect as well. And the matter became very clean, so that people cannot do sajda for some other reason and call it sajda of reverence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for us. But the malaika, they did a sajda of reverence to Hazrat Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, our great grandfather. And the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning it is not the body but the soul. So the respect and the honor of a human being is related to their ruh, is related to what they are carrying within their body. And that ruh is our source to connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has come directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It connects with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those people who work on their ruh and this connection, they are in reality above and higher and more respectable than angels. Otherwise, ulaika kal an'ami bal hum adall. If a human being does not recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other words, does not connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which only happens by purifying your outer self and inner self, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is declaring them like cattle, even worse. They are like cattle. Talk about angels and being higher than angels, or talk about being worse than cattle, inferior, lower than even cattle. So my dear respected brothers, when we talked about Tazkia, one of the jobs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. He purifies them, in that he is purifying them as the Quran is coming, and because the words of the Quran have been structured in such a way that he will keep purifying them. He does it now and he'll keep doing that. Yatlu alayhim ayati, he recites the ayat now and he will keep reciting them in the future. Wa yuzakkihim, he purifies them, their body and their soul now, and he will keep doing it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an understanding. So, just like we gave the example of the physical purity and how physical impurity is a barrier between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the impurities of the soul, they are also a barrier between us and the ma'rifah and the recognition and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the soul has dark spots on it, then it does not accept the truth. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us. Famous hadith, most of you, I hope and expect, must have heard it, is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, more or less meaning that when a person commits a sin, their heart is marked with a dark spot. If they repent, the spot is taken away. But if they do not, and they keep on making sin after sin after sin, a dark spot after another, after another, after another, so much so that the heart becomes encrusted with darkness. And then it becomes, in one narration, it becomes such that it cannot accept any goodness. It cannot accept any truth. And there, after ourselves, we severing our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bit by bit by bit, the connection of our ruh with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we end up in a state where no truth can be accepted. So therefore, just like our body has purities, physical body has purities and impurities, our soul also has purities and impurities. The purities are the good qualities of the personality that have been mentioned in the Quran. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Take help from sabr and salah. Now, Allah mentions salah, of course, which is a physical act of worship. But what about sabr, which Allah mentions before salah here? It is a feature of personality that nobody has ever physically seen the shape of. It relates to our ruh and our internal personality. And the Prophet ﷺ's job was to teach people how to be sabirin, to show them how to be sabirin, what is sabr. And this is the purity, one of the things of purity of the inner self. Giving some examples from the Quran. إِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. Who has seen khushu'? Who has seen the physical shape of khushu'? Humility and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala peacefully and calmly. Again, a feature of the personality. So my dear respected brothers, in today's world, we think our limited thoughts are limited to only that which we can see. Money, house, business, profession, investment, beauty. Allah is saying that the real success, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Without doubt, eternal success is for those who purify their soul. And without doubt, eternal doom is for those who dip it and submerge it and drown it in this vague world of vanity, in the world of sinning. So therefore, my dear respected brothers, what we are giving importance to is not important in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we have forgotten and we don't care about, Allah has mentioned it again and again and again, different aspects of it in the Quran, and Allah is telling us that the real success depends on that. The Prophet ﷺ has said that Allah does not look at your wealth or your face. Allah does not care about your wealth or your face. What Allah looks at is what is in the heart. What is in the heart? How much sincere you are, and what did you actually do in terms of a'mal. So my dear respected brothers, this is one of the jobs of our beloved Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah is saying, we did a mercy to you, an unimaginable mercy to you, O human beings, when we sent a Nabi among you from your kind, who tells you what is this purity of the soul and your physical self, and who purifies you, and who improves your personality, which you do not talk about, which you generally do not think about, which we do not think about. What is akhlaq? What is sabr? What is controlling your anger? What is the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is taqwa? What is hating this dunya? What is running away from this dunya? What is protecting yourself from the excessive wealth, love of wealth? All those things. What is arrogance? All these things have been mentioned in the Quran, but we don't want to think about it. All we want to think about is, yes, we are a good Muslim, we want to pray, we are a good Muslim. Somebody who prays is a good Muslim, somebody who does not pray is a bad Muslim. Na'udhu billah. Prayer is the first farz of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody wants to undermine the importance of it. It is true that when you don't care about even prayer, then what else will you care about? So yes, we have to care about salah, but our deen is not only restricted to salah and siyam. 1 month comes, you'll fast 5 days, or maybe na'udhu billah, at the end of the day you will just pray 1 or 2 prayers of the day. This is not our deen. This is not our complete deen. Our deen talks about, it's a complete code of conduct, and Allah has not left the ruh and the inner world and the hidden world of our batin, of our inner self. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not left it unaddressed. Allah has talked about it several places in the Quran. If we do not give importance to that, we are negating by our action the very job for which the Prophet ﷺ was sent into this world. Can we deserve to be called ummati then? Imagine Allah is saying, we are sending this Nabi and we are doing a mercy to you because he teaches you those things and works on your inner self. And we neglect it totally, and we call it that this is something of the Sufis and this and that. Exaggeration is always discouraged. Those people who go in the direction of excess and add things in deen which are not quoted in the Quran and the Sunnah, of course they are wrong. But to totally subtract the science from deen itself is also wrong. The Prophet ﷺ's job was to do it. Allah has talked about these things in the Quran. We cannot subtract it from deen. We have to work about it. Allah is saying your success depends on those things. So therefore, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an understanding, and inshallah in the future khutbah we want to talk about certain aspects of it, inshallah, if life and tawfiq permit. This is a very, very, very important branch of deen. In fact, this branch of deen is that which applies to us 24/7. Ibadat, there is restricted specific times for it. If we want to do it, we can do it. If we have to do it, if it's faraiz, we can do it. But then there is some times that we cannot even pray nawafil, we are not allowed. We cannot even do sajda at that time. Siyam, there's certain days that we cannot even fast nafil. Hajj is only once a year. Zakat is only once a year. What about the rest, the remaining moments of our life? How are we a Muslim in those periods, in those times, when we are not praying, when we are in the market, when we are with our family, when we are doing business, when we are at work? How are we a Muslim? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an understanding this science of batin, which generally in layman's term is called tasawwuf. Now it depends on how we define it. Our akabirin, Allama ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, and others, great pious predecessors, all have talked about tasawwuf. All have talked about this science of deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this fitna that is arising these days, that we na'uzu billah want to subtract this branch of deen totally. This is a very important, in fact the most important branch of deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an understanding. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us closer to our beloved Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in letter and spirit. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas sami'ul alim wa tub alayna innaka antat tawwabur rahim. Brothers who haven't prayed the sunnah should do so now. Jazakallahu khairan.